Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshur-unmilitam yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya-manobhishtam Sthapitam yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Supatantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpadarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. So just a quick review of chapter 5 that we discussed yesterday. In chapter 3, the Lord talks about Karma Yoga, and in chapter 4, he talks about transcendental knowledge. So chapter 5 begins with Arjuna being in a dilemma again, asking the same question: should I carry on fighting, or should I work, or should I leave? Which should I do? And the critical question is, can you continue to work, do your duties and responsibilities, and still be Krishna conscious? Is it possible to work full time and think of Krishna? The answer to that question from Lord Krishna is yes. So the question is, how is it possible to achieve perfection of thinking about Krishna while we have so many duties and responsibilities to perform? So in this regard, I want to talk about a little pastime with Janaka Maharaj. Janaka Maharaj is mentioned in chapter 3, shloka 20 by Lord Krishna as one of the great kings who Arjuna could look up to and follow in his footsteps. So Janaka Maharaj is a self-realized soul. He is also a devotee of Vishnu. And in those days, kings surrounded themselves with sages who were well versed in the scriptures, and sages who could advise them if they ever needed their counsel on how to actually run a kingdom, how to be a good king, how to provide good governance, how to take care of the citizens nicely, how to make sure that the kingdom is corruption-free, how to make sure that the citizens are happy, they are satisfied. Actually, our Shastras say a sign of a good king is when the kingdom experiences prosperity, when everybody is happy and satisfied. That is a symbol that the ruler is a pious ruler, is a noble ruler, is a virtuous ruler. So Janaka Maharaj obviously exemplified all of these characteristics of being a great ruler because he was well versed in the scriptures and he had surrounded himself with sages who would advise him. Actually, that is the role of the Brahmanas. The role of the Brahmanas is to advise the administration and how to actually conduct their affairs in the kingdom. Now, the sages knew that Janaka Maharaj was a great devotee of Lord Vishnu, but they were puzzled. How is it that he is able to be a great devotee of Lord Vishnu while at the same time carrying so many heavy duties and responsibilities as a king? How is he able to do both? I think this question gets asked often by devotees. Is it really possible to do both? Focus on one's duties and responsibilities and at the same time be thinking about Krishna or practicing Krishna consciousness. Because it seems like you can only do one or the other, but you cannot do both at the same time. Multitasking. So the sages one day approach Janaka Maharaj and tell him, we're not able to understand how you're able to do two things simultaneously. We have left all these duties and responsibilities. We are spending time in the forests meditating for hours and hours and hours. How is it that you're able to do both simultaneously? You have so many, you're shouldering so many burdens as a king. And at the same time, you're a great devotee of, you're practicing Bhakti Yoga. When the sages asked Janak Maharaj this question, Janak Maharaj says, of course, it's possible to do both. And so the sages say, but we have not figured this out, how you can do both. Can you tell us what is the secret? So Janak Maharaj says, I'll reveal it to you, but why don't you come back tomorrow? He tells them, tomorrow, I will throw you a grand feast. So please come and honor this feast and be my guest. So the sages are, of course, very curious. And what is this? We asked a question. He's telling us, come back tomorrow. I'll give you the answer. So next day, all the sages come. Janaka Maharaj greets them very nicely. He washes all of their feet and gives them a nice seat to sit, lays out the banana leaves, and he personally serves them Krishna Prasadam. So as the sages were getting ready to honor Prasadam, when they looked up, each of the sage noticed that there was a sword hanging by a very thin thread over each of their heads. Now, of course, if somebody invites you to your house and does this, you're going to panic, wondering what's going on. So it's a very sharp sword dangling with a very thin thread over each of their heads. Of course, they were worried about their safety, and they asked Janak Maharaj, Maharaj, what is this? Is this safe for us to sit here? And Janak Maharaj just smiles and says, it's absolutely safe. Please don't worry. You're under my protection. Now, they didn't have any reason to doubt a great soul like Janak Maharaj because he is a devotee of Lord Vishnu. So they trusted Janak Maharaj when he said, this sword is not going to fall on you. You're safe. So prasadam is served, and of course the sages didn't want to waste too much time having prasadam, so they had a very quick meal. They washed their hands and they were anxious to hear the answer that they had come to Janak Maharaj about. So when they say, okay, we're ready to hear your answer, what's the secret? Janak Maharaj says, did all of you eat well? Are you all satisfied? And they said, yes, yes, we're all satisfied with the sumptuous prasadam. And at that time, Janak Maharaj asks them, what were you thinking of when you were honoring prasadam? What was on your mind? And of course, the sages said, we were thinking about the sword dangling. So even though you had given us reassurance that nothing would happen, nevertheless, there is always this fear that accidents can happen. So each of the sages said, yes, I was thinking about the sword that is hanging over my head. So Janak Maharaj said, that's the answer to your question. While you were honoring prasadam, your mind was elsewhere. Where was your mind? Your mind was on that sword dangling over your head. Similarly, when I'm doing my duties and responsibilities, in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about Lord Vishnu. So Krishna says in chapter 5, it is possible to do both. You can work and be completely detached from the results of your work and be thinking about Krishna. So Arjuna may be protesting. He's saying, okay, first you're asking me to renounce all of my actions. Now you're inspiring me to act and to do selfless work. Which is it precisely? And at that time, in one of the shlokas that we read, Lord Krishna says, both are okay. Both are on the path of self-realization. Both lead to liberation. But of the two, Krishna says, work with devotion is better than renouncing work or renouncing actions or results of your work. And at that time, Lord Krishna says, one who neither desires the reward of work nor hates it, he is always in the spirit of renunciation, which means when you're working, you shouldn't think I'm attached to the work or I hate this kind of work. So we must become free of dualities. I like to do this, I don't like to do this. So the minute you have that I like to do this kind of work, I don't like to do that kind of work, it creates tension for you, dualities. However, renunciation is not possible without yoga. And in that, we heard, or rather we read that table that contrasts and compares working with devotion and renouncing work. Yoga means to unite. Unite with whom? To unite with the Supreme Lord, to go back to Him, to serve Him, to love Him. So without this union with the Lord, your renunciation is not complete. But a sage who has devotion for me while he is doing his work, who's absorbed in me, Krishna says such a person achieves the supreme position very quickly. So you can ask, what is the difference between Karma Yoga in chapter 3 and Karma Sannyasa Yoga in chapter 5? Are they not one and the same? The goal of Karma Yoga is to actually come to the realization that you are a spirit soul. So it's just the beginning of your journey to realize that you are Atman. By receiving more and more information about the Supreme Lord, you are able to detach your senses from the material world and start to center yourself within. So this knowledge of the Atman should then lead you to understand that there's somebody far more powerful than you. So that leads you to explore knowledge about the divine, transcendental knowledge. So the minute you recognize the Atman within you and understand there is also a Paramatma within everybody else, then all you see is Atman and Paramatman everywhere. Therefore, you are able to rise above judgmental tendencies. You can see the unity in diversity. So this is actually Brahman realization. Brahman realization means you see the Atman within everybody and you recognize the Paramatman also within everybody. Therefore, there was a shloka where the Lord says, a cow, an elephant, a dog, a brahmana, a lower caste chandala, a self-realized person doesn't distinguish between them. So in reality, there is nobody higher than you and there is nobody lower than you. In the sense that all souls are equal. All souls belong to the Supreme Lord. He is Purusha. He is the ultimate enjoyer. So, which is better, renunciation or work in devotion? Krishna says work in devotion is better. So work is worship versus renouncing work. So the choice is, should we work or should we renounce? And should we work and be detached from the results, or should we work with attachment to Krishna? Those are the three choices. One is you can renounce all work and run away. Two is you can work and renounce the results. Three is you can work and use the results in the service of Krishna with devotion. Of these three, Krishna is saying, working and using the results to please me is what is the best. We also talked about the three doers, the soul, the super soul, and material nature. Desires actually originate in the soul, and desires originate when the consciousness comes into contact with Rajogun. Who are the Guna avatars? Lord Vishnu represents Sattvagun. They are called the Guna avatars. Lord Shiva represents Tamogun, and Lord Brahma represents Rajogun. So Lord Brahma creates. You cannot create unless you are under the influence of Rajogun, or rather, Rajogun is necessary if we want to create. Tamogun comes into play when you're in the mood of self-destruction or destruction of others. Sattvagun, you want to maintain equanimity. So they are called the Guna avatars. Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva are known as the Guna avatars. So in this triangle, the soul, super soul, and Prakriti, the soul is the culprit because the soul generates innumerable desires. And the Lord's role is just to sanction or decline that particular desire. If the Lord sanctions it, then he instructs Prakriti to execute what he has sanctioned. If the desire does not get sanctioned, then of course the Jivatma may feel frustrated, may get upset, may go into depression. So in shlokas 7 to 12, I'll come to chapter 5. I think somebody sent me a question yesterday about understanding self and how you treat others. So if you look at shlokas 7 to 12, actually Krishna is talking about the Nishkama Karma Yogi here, one who works in devotion, who is a pure soul and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. A person in the divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. What does that mean, he does nothing at all? He is actually engaged in a karma. Externally, he is busy. In your eyes and my eyes, he's doing the same activities as you and me. Internally, his consciousness is dovetailed with the divine, and therefore he does nothing at all. This is akarma. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he's aloof from them. So Krishna is saying, while we are doing our duties and responsibilities, we should be detached from emotions and feelings about those duties and responsibilities. In the sense, one should not have expectations. While performing duties and responsibilities, to look for praise, to look for acknowledgement, to look for validation, these things only happen when our self-awareness is not there. A self-satisfied person is not dependent on others to tell them how good they are. They are able to judge for themselves where they are good and where they have faults and that they need to fix. So self-validation is one of the symptoms of a great soul. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. The yogis, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, and intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. So if you do your duties and responsibilities with detachment to results, Krishna says it benefits you because it makes you pure. So now what are the results for such a person? The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Which means if you're hankering for things all the time, I want this, I want this, I want that, it'll entangle you into more and more greed. So that's why to one of the questions yesterday, I responded by saying, even when we pray, we should not trouble the Lord. I want this, I want that. Because then in reality, you're not really loving the Lord. You're just using him as a shopkeeper to give you things. And as I mentioned, ideally, a good devotee does not want to trouble their father. Because the father is already taking care of you. Roof over your head, food on the table, clothes on your back. And therefore, when we pray, our only prayer is that, my Lord, Let me never get separated from you. Let me never forget you. Please somehow or the other engage me in the service of Vaishnavas. Engage me in your service. Please help me wake up early in the morning so I can chant nicely. Please help me manage my time better so I can come and do some seva in the temple. Please give me the self-discipline so that I can attend the classes regularly. These are wonderful prayers. Everything else, the Lord already is taking care of you very nicely. You may not have everything that you desire, but that doesn't mean that you don't have anything. A devotee's wealth is the presence of the Lord and Vaishnavas in their life. That's their true wealth. So Krishna says, when the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, neither working nor causing work to be done. Neither working doesn't mean he's gone off to the forest. It simply means he's not performing karma, nor is he causing consequences. City of 9 gates means your 2 eyes, your 2 ears, your mouth, 9 gates. So this material body, it's illuminated, Krishna says. Then the Lord says, I don't assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. But a person who is in this human body, because of their ignorance, they engage in papa and punya. Because they don't have real knowledge. And in the very next shloka, Krishna says, when however one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, nescience means ignorance or darkness is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. So similarly, when you're practicing yoga, bhakti yoga, how do you get this knowledge? Simply by staying committed to chanting, to listening to classes, to hearing lectures, to doing seva. Slowly, Krishna says, the darkness that is there in your consciousness will be set aside, and this is actually the beginning of enlightenment. In the next shloka, Krishna is giving another instruction for us. When one's intelligence, mind, and faith and refuge are all fixed in the Supreme, then one becomes fully cleansed of misgivings. Misgivings means misinterpretations of situations in life. People are not treating me well. I have so many problems. For so many years, I've been dealing with these problems. There never seems to be an end to my problems. So these kind of misgivings that you have will be eliminated as long as you are fixed up in being connected with Krishna. And what is Krishna saying? After becoming fully cleansed of misgivings through complete knowledge, you proceed straight on the path of liberation, Krishna is saying. And the question that was sent to me yesterday is answered in the following shlokas. The Lord is talking about the symptoms of such a self-realized soul. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog-eater. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death, which means Krishna is saying you may be still in this human form, in this material world. You are already liberated because your mind is fixed up in the Supreme Lord. Krishna says they are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. Why? Because they are seeing Atman in everybody. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon obtaining something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, and who knows the science of God, is already situated in transcendence. So again, Krishna is describing the symptoms of such a person. They are not bewildered by ups and downs in life. Why? Because they are fixed up in the Supreme Lord. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. So happiness, peace of mind, all of that resides within you. If you're searching for it outside of you, including in other people, such as your family members, you will never find it there. Everything begins with self-discipline. Self-discipline leads to self-control. Self-control leads to greater self-awareness. Self-awareness puts you on the path of self-liberation, self-realization. So if we have to begin somewhere, we have to begin by following the instructions of the Acharya. You may not know how it works. You may not even believe that it's going to work for you, but still it will work. You have to have just a little bit of faith that you want to give it a shot. What do you have to lose after all? So Krishna is saying, in this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. An intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. Krishna is saying anything that you want to experiment with. You may think that will make me happy, this will make me happy, that will make me happy. Krishna is giving us an instruction. They have a beginning and an end. Therefore, a wise man will not get caught up with, if I do this, I'll be happy. If that person praises me, I will be happy. That happiness you will find within you. How do you find that happiness within you? You have to be connected to Krishna. You have to strengthen and deepen your relationship with Krishna. Another important instruction, before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. So Krishna is saying there will be ups and downs in life. He wants you to learn how to tolerate it. If you learn to tolerate what is coming your way, then you have overcome your desire and anger. Desire of others to do things for you. We have this deep desire that other people should please us all the time. They should conduct themselves in such a way that they make you happy. They should please you. They should satisfy you. This is the mood of being a master. You want other people to be your servants. Their job is to make you happy. That will not work. Rather, if we think we are the servant, we are here to serve everybody else, then you will achieve self-satisfaction. So you see how nicely, how sweetly the Lord is giving basic instructions to us on how to manage ourselves and therefore how to manage others. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. So happiness resides within you. Happiness comes when you discover who you really are. Happiness comes when you discover that you are meant to serve Krishna. And as long as you're getting many, many opportunities to serve Krishna and his devotees, you are happy. That's when your level of self-awareness increases. And as your self-awareness increases, your expectations of others will decrease. Your unrealistic expectation of others will decrease. And as your self-awareness increases, you will realize you have more and more and more and more faults than you can handle. When your self-awareness increases, it's not that you think, I'm perfect now. Actually, the more you become self-aware, the more you realize how many faults you have. And therefore, you are completely dependent on Krishna to help you overcome your own demoniac tendencies. So one whose happiness is within, who is active. Krishna is not saying such a person has run into the forest. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, and who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation, the Supreme. So Krishna is saying, be active, learn to serve others. When you learn to serve others, you realize that your misery is not as bad as their miserable condition. Again, this increases self-awareness. It increases your consciousness. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection. Remember, in one of the classes I said, Lord Krishna wants you to strive for perfection in everything that you do, but to do it without the accompanying pride that comes with it. So those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. So Krishna is saying, as long as you get started on this path, and you stick to this path with self-discipline and commitment, endeavor for perfection, endeavor to do the right thing, endeavor to follow the instructions of an acharya like Srila Prabhupada, Krishna is saying liberation is assured for you in the future. So there was one slide that talked about how a self-realized soul treats himself and looks at others. I hope by reading these shlokas, I don't remember who sent me the question, but I hope by us reading these shlokas, it has become clear to you what Krishna is actually saying. So now in shloka 27 and 28, Krishna is going to talk about Dhyana Yoga, which is the connection to chapter 6. So thus far, he's talked about transcendental knowledge and doing Nishkama Karma Yoga. Now he's going to go to Dhyana Yoga. Krishna is setting the stage to speak about Dhyana Yoga or meditation. Shutting out all external sense objects keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in the state is certainly liberated. Now, right after talking about Ashtanga Yoga in 27 and 28, the Lord is going to talk about the superiority of Bhakti Yoga. So the last shloka is actually about Bhakti Yoga. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme Lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living beings, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So this is the peace formula. 1, know that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. 2, know that Krishna is the personality that is accepting and enjoying your sacrifices and austerities. Know that the Supreme Lord is the Lord of all planets and the Lord of all demigods. We should know that Krishna has the best interests for you. He is your best friend. He is your well-wisher. If you know all of this and you're living your life in this way, by practicing Krishna consciousness, Krishna says you will achieve peace. So with that, we are going to begin chapter 6. So chapter 6 is called Dhyana Yoga, meditating. Meditating on yourself and ultimately meditating on the Paramatma within you. The Paramatma within you is the four-handed Kshiro Dakshayi Vishnu. So this is Dhyana Yoga, meditation. So before we begin, let's offer our humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So today's acronym is easy. Actually, Ashtanga Yoga is not easy, but that's the acronym. So our biggest problem is our mind. Our mind takes us in different directions simultaneously. 1 minute the mind says do this, next minute the mind has changed direction and says don't do this, do something else. So the question is our mind our enemy or our friend? Krishna is going to answer that question. How do we deal with this mind? There is a story in one of our Shastras that explains the challenge that one faces with our mind. You know, the monkey never sits still. It's always jumping from branch to branch, from tree to tree. So the mind is compared to the monkey, Markata. So imagine this monkey being drunk. Now imagine that drunk monkey being bitten by a scorpion. What would be its condition? Similarly, the mind is like that. Very hard to control unless you train yourself to control your mind. So one way to control the mind is by practicing Ashtanga Yoga. And then Arjuna will ask a question. You know, you've talked about different types of transcendentalists. So the word transcendentalist means anybody practicing any one of the yogas that is discussed in Bhagavad Gita, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. So Arjuna, out of curiosity, he asks a question. So let us say people are practicing whatever different yoga that you've talked about, Somna. What if they don't succeed in one life? What if they don't achieve their goal in that life? What will happen? So we'll hear Krishna's answer to that question. And then the last two shlokas of this particular chapter, Krishna compares and contrasts the different yogas, and he will again reiterate that Bhakti Yoga is the best. And he will say, in my opinion, Krishna will say, in my opinion, Bhakti Yoga is the best. So we'll read those shlokas. So how does chapter 6 begin? Chapter 6 begins with Lord Krishna speaking. So one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life. So Krishna repeatedly says, if you're just performing your duties and responsibilities and you're detached from the results, you're actually a renounced person. You're as good as a sannyasi. And what is Krishna saying? He is the true mystic, not the one who lights no fire and performs no duty. So if you run off to the forest, you're not performing any duty. You're only focusing on yourself. Krishna prefers that you not do that. What is called renunciation, you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, O son of Pandu. For one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. And from here on out, the Lord will speak about two different types of two levels of one who is practicing Ashtanga Yoga. So if you're in the neophyte stage, if you're brand new to practicing Ashtanga Yoga, Ashtanga means 8 limbs of yoga. We'll go over those 8 limbs today. You are called Yoga Rurukshuhu. You're new to yoga and you're just beginning on this path. And then Krishna will also talk about the Yoga Ruda, the one who is in the advanced stage of practicing Ashtanga Yoga. So let us look at the slides. So in Shloka 6, Krishna says, Bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jitah anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, mind, I know, is very difficult to control. But one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. So really, your problems, the so-called problems that you're dealing with, have actually arisen in your mind. You know, there is a very famous saying. I'm sure all of you would have read it some point or the other. You would have seen this poster somewhere. There is a saying that mind your thoughts because your thoughts become words. Mind your words because your words become actions. Mind your actions because your actions become habits. Mind your habits because your habits determines your character. Mind your character because your character determines your destiny. So thoughts lead to words, lead to actions, end up as habits, determines your character, and therefore determines your destiny. So mind is such a powerful instrument. We should learn how to use it for our own benefit. So Krishna is saying, Somebody who has learned to conquer the mind, they don't have to worry about the mind causing them all kinds of distress, because the mind is the best of your friends. But if you failed to conquer your mind, what is Krishna saying? Your mind will remain the greatest enemy, he's saying. So why do we want to live with an enemy? Day in and day out, 24/7, our mind is disturbing us. Should we not learn the techniques on how to manage ourselves? Because you can't reject your mind. Your mind is there. So the best thing we can do for ourselves is to learn how to control our mind. And the ABCD formula works perfectly to control your mind. Association with devotees, reading the scriptures every day, 10-15 minutes, chanting the holy names of the Lord constantly, worshipping the Lord, and changing your diet. Later on today, I have an opportunity to speak to some very young students as part of NSS. And the topic I've been given is youth and spirituality. So how to encourage the youth to take up spirituality? You know, they may be very skeptical about spirituality because of everything that they've already seen. So it's interesting. I was doing some research for this topic that I have to speak about in a couple of hours. And really, the two things when we talk about diet, there are two things. There is the physical diet to take care of your physical health. And then there is the mental diet. What are you feeding your mind? You know. And as part of doing that research, I came across an interesting way of looking at the word human being. You know, we're all made up of matter and spirit. Matter is this body and spirit is this consciousness. So the word human actually refers to this body that distinguishes this body from the body of a tiger or a lion or a bee or a butterfly. The word being actually represents consciousness. So if you really want to be a human being, we have to focus both on matter and spirit. We don't have a choice. Otherwise, we end up becoming only human doings. We are in the form of a human body, but all we are doing is we are just engaged in activities. Mindless, mind-numbing activities. So to truly be a human being, you have to address both the matter and the spirit. Without that, you're not a complete person. So when is your mind going to be your friend? When it learns to follow your direction. When it makes healthy choices. When it is progressive. When it is detached from sense gratification. As I mentioned, most of us will practice mixed bhakti because we still have some material desires. That's okay. But over a period of time, you'll realize that those material desires are just frustrating. But if you learn to control your mind, then suddenly you feel this relief, this release of unnecessary tension that you have built within yourself. The burdens that you carry in your mind weighs you down constantly. It makes you feel exhausted. It makes you feel like you want to run away. It makes you want to give up on yourself. But you can be free from all of your anxieties simply by learning to connect with your inner self and to connect with the Supreme Lord. This is actually elevation of consciousness. There was a nice formula as I was doing my research. There was a nice formula that I came across. Stress equals pressure divided by resilience. Stress equals pressure divided by resilience. Pressure is external. It's there in that external world. It's going to keep coming towards us. Resilience is internal. So one can never change the numerator. That's not in our control. One can only change the denominator, which is resilience. So if you develop the resilience, then it is easier for you to handle pressures, external pressures. So really, the solution is within you. It is not outside of you. It's not in other people's conduct, other people's behavior. It's not in the way other people treat you. It's how you view yourself. If you value yourself and if your self-esteem is high, then you will not worry about what others say, because they may be speaking out of anger or ignorance. And it is easier to forgive others because you're so happy within yourself. You don't worry, mother-in-law is doing this, father-in-law is doing this, whatever it is, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, husband, wife, children, it doesn't matter. You reached a stage where you have gone deep within you to understand. Again, I will come back. Self-discipline leads to self-control. Self-control helps you develop self-awareness, and self-awareness leads you to the path of self-realization and self-liberation. So everything is about the self, right? Think about it. The opposite part is self-destruction. Self-loathing, not liking yourself, hating yourself. So everything has to do with the self. Nothing is external, everything is internal. So when does your mind actually become your enemy? When you follow directions that take you away from the Supreme Lord. You end up being irritated, agitated, misguided. You become attached to your ego, false ego. And what's the result? You feel completely confused. You feel entangled, you feel degraded, you feel like you are not worth it, other people are not worth it. So Krishna is saying mind is such a powerful instrument. It can do good or it can do very, very harmful things to you. So you would have seen this also in the Secrets of Gita revealed. Those senses are like the 5 horses pulling you in different directions. The mind is constantly recollecting from the past your experiences, and it's saying, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. The intelligence is actually driving you in a particular direction. This entire chariot is your body. And the soul is just sitting and quietly observing as the passenger. So it is really the intelligence that has to be used to control the mind, and the mind has to be used to control the senses. Therefore, these are remember, the 3 hiding places of your lust. Lust includes the desire to be acknowledged, the desire for praise. That is also lust. That is also a material desire. So we have to use our intelligence to control the mind, and we have to use the mind to control the senses. But then if your intelligence is caught up in material things, where is the chance that you're giving yourself to control your mind? The only way the intelligence can be influenced is through scriptures. Slowly but surely, you will come to the path of relieving some of your anxiety. So Krishna has a specific definition of what exactly is Ashtanga Yoga and how it should be performed. But in today's world, yoga has acquired so many different meanings. Those meanings are not based in scriptures. So what is yoga? Is it a physical exercise? Is it some paranormal activity? Is that really torturing your body? Is that being able to put your body in different types of positions? What is yoga? There's a detailed explanation of yoga given by Lord Krishna in chapter 6. It's very fascinating. But today people use the word yoga, attach it to something else, and they sell everything to you. This yoga, that yoga, every yoga. But understanding Ashtanga Yoga, you can get a broad understanding by reading chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita. So what is actually yoga? Ashtanga Yoga? It's called Ashtanga, Ashtanga, 8 angas, 8 limbs. So this Yoga Rurukshuhu, a neophyte, does the first 5 things: Yam, Niyam, Asana, Pranayam, and Pratyahara. So before you even begin to learn the asanas and the breathing techniques, there are certain do's and don'ts we have to follow. There are restrictions in what you can and cannot eat. There are restrictions on recreational activities. There are restrictions on how much you sleep or how little you sleep. So you can say yam and niyam is a whole lot of do's and don'ts that you should follow before you begin to practice the asana. Because if you practice the asana and pranayam without following those do's and don'ts, it's not going to yield powerful results for you. This is Krishna's description of yoga. So after you have learned to do the asanas and learned to do breathing techniques, then slowly you withdraw your senses. You cut yourself from the external world. And you begin to concentrate on the Atman. Meditation actually begins then. So this is the Yoga Ruda stage, the advanced stage of concentration and meditative absorption, until you achieve the final stage, which is called Samadhi. When you realize qualitatively the Atman and Paramatman are the same. Qualitatively, not quantitatively. This does not mean that you begin to think you are God. No, you just understand that you have the same qualities as God, and you've discovered those qualities in you. That is Samadhi. So this is do's and don'ts. So we can come to very quickly, what is Krishna saying? What was the shloka? 10. A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. So to practice this Ashtanga Yoga, he should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness, which means to give up something and go into the forest, you should already be in a stage where you know that nothing belongs to you, that you don't have any more desires. You're ready to fully focus on practicing Ashtanga Yoga. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusha grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin and a soft cloth. The seat should be neither too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. So to practice Ashtanga Yoga, you need to go to a place that is secluded, it is sacred, and you should be doing all of this. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind, senses, and activities and fixing the mind on one point. One should hold one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. So this is another way in which you can realize the Supreme Lord through this process called Ashtanga Yoga. Thus, practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God by cessation of material existence. So this is where you're renouncing the material world, you've renounced your family, you've renounced your desires, you've renounced all fear and anxiety, and you've gone to just simply meditate. And then Krishna gets into other details. There is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much, or eats too little, sleeps too much, or does not sleep enough. So these are the yam niyam. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, and work can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. So Krishna is saying, before you begin practicing the asanas, this is what you should regulate. What you eat, how much you sleep, what kind of recreation activities, what kind of work you do. Then you can begin practicing the asanas, the breathing techniques, concentration. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. And the Lord uses an analogy: as a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. So while you're deeply meditating somewhere in a sacred place in the forest, suddenly your mind shouldn't wander to, oh, what is happening with my family? So it should be like a lamp in a windless place, undisturbed. It is not flickering. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth. And upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. So once he achieves samadhi, he thinks nothing better than this. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actually freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. So these are the do's and don'ts, the postures, the breathing, the withdrawing of the senses, controlling the mind, meditating on Lord Vishnu, and then achieving samadhi, complete absorption in Vishnu. So can anyone do yoga? No, as we've read in the shlokas, Krishna says you should not have any material desires. Your mind should not be agitated. You should be practicing celibacy. Your habits, eating, sleeping, recreation, and work should be regulated. You should be like a lamp in a windless place. So after Krishna talks for some time, Arjuna says, oh, that doesn't seem possible at all. So Arjuna will say, oh, Madhusudana, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. Arjuna says, Chanchalam hi manah Krishna. How can I do this if my mind is not under my control? So, mind is very difficult. So the actual shloka here, in the next shloka, Chanchalam hi manah Krishna pramati balavadhridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayor iva sudushkaram. Arjuna is telling Krishna, my mind, oh, it's restless, it is turbulent, it is obstinate, it is very strong, Krishna. To subdue it, I think, it's more difficult than controlling the wind. So Arjuna is telling Krishna, you really expect me to control my mind like this? I can't control my mind, so how can I run to the forest? So now Arjuna is realizing, oh, I thought I will give up my weapons and go away. Now you're telling me what all is involved to do this kind of yoga. I can't do it. It's easier for me to control the wind. So what's the nature of our mind? It's flickering. It always creates doubts. And the doubts arise because of your attachment to things or your attachment to your expectations. So mind has a phenomenal ability to rationalize your actions, to rationalize your thoughts. Arjuna is saying, the mind is very obstinate, it's very strong. Once a thought has been seeded into your mind, it's very difficult to get that thought out, especially when it comes to things like, I am hurt. Somebody said something to me. Somebody used some harsh words. You're not able to get the words out. You're not able to forget that another person mistreated you. And you cling on to that thought. The worst part is the mind never asks you for permission. It just does things like as if it is like that monkey jumping from branch to branch. So after Arjuna protests, Krishna will tell him, I agree the mind is difficult to control, but it can be done. Shri Bhagavanuvacha asamshayam mahabaho mano durnigriham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna, O mighty armed son of Kunti. You see how nicely Krishna praises Arjuna. O mighty armed son of Kunti. It is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment. Abhyasena vairagyena. You must practice, and practice leads to detachment. So, abhyasena. What kind of practices should we do to control our mind? Prahlad Maharaj in Srimad Bhagavatam talks about the 9 processes of bhakti when he's giving instructions to the other students. When his teachers are away, at the age of 5, he's giving these instructions. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam Vandanam Dasyam, Sakhyam Atmanivedanam. So these are the 9 processes that Prahlad talks about. Shravanam, it begins with hearing. Hearing what? Hearing the scriptures. Kirtanam Vishnu. You chant the holy names of the Lord and sing in Kirtan along with other Vaishnavas. Smaranam, to always be remembering Krishna and to never forget him. There are one do and one don't that trumps all other do's and don'ts. You know, the Vedic scriptures have so many do's and don'ts and it can be confusing. It's very hard to adhere to so many do's and don'ts. So in Bhakti Yoga, our acharyas tell you, there is only one do and one don't that you should practice. What is that one do? Always remember Krishna. What is the don't? Never forget Krishna. This rule supersedes all other rules. It is the first and only most important rule. If you can adhere to this, always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna, you are on a good path. So, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam. So you can go to holy lands, visit them, use your feet to travel to the holy dham. You can use your feet to do parikrama of the temple. So, you know, in olden days, the temples were constructed in such a way where you could circumambulate the entire temple. So if you ever want to circumambulate the temple, do it 4 times. You're circumambulating all the deities inside the temple. Padasevanam. Archanam, worshipping the Lord. Vandanam, offering prayers to the Lord. Dasyam, becoming a servant of the Lord and becoming a servant of his devotees. Sakyam, becoming a friend of the Lord. Atmanivedanam, completely surrendering to the Supreme Lord. So these are the 9 processes of bhakti. And the most important of those 2 of the 9 limbs is hearing and chanting. By hearing and chanting itself, it is going to lead you to remembering Krishna. Vairagena, detachment. Detach your mind, senses, and intelligence from those things that are not beneficial for your spirituality. It's not easy to do in the beginning, but with practice, it can be done. So that's when Arjuna asks that critical question. You have talked about so many different types of yogis. What if I begin on this path and I'm not successful in this life? Is everything going to go to zero? And when I take birth again, I have to start all over again? That is the question that Arjuna is asking. What if I start, but I'm not able to finish in this life? That's the question. Prapya punyakritam lokan usitva shashvati samaha suchinam shrimatam gehe yogo brashto vijayate. So Krishna is responding to the question that Arjuna has asked. Krishna is saying, the unsuccessful yogi, after many, many years of enjoyment on the planets of the pious living entities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, no good deed goes unpunished or unrewarded, I should say. No bad deed goes unpunished. No good deed goes unrewarded. So, what is the reward for those who have practiced but have not been successful in this one lifetime? Krishna says, I reward them with a very long life in the heavenly planets. Once they're done enjoying themselves in the heavenly planets, then I give them a human birth back in this earthly planet. But I make sure they are born in a family of Brahmanas, or they are born in a family of wealthy aristocrats. If they're born in a family of Brahmanas, they can continue from where they left off in their previous life. If they are born into a wealthy family, they don't have to worry about working hard and slogging it out. They can concentrate on spirituality. So this is Krishna's response to Arjuna's question. What happens if you practice and you're not successful? You don't reach your goal, or you give up because it's too difficult. Especially Jnana Yoga and Dhyana Yoga, you may give up because it's too difficult. You may not succeed in this one life. So Krishna is saying it's okay. Such people, because they've not been successful in this one life, they will go enjoy themselves for all the good that they've done. They will come back and take birth in the right types of families so that they can continue from where they left off. So now Krishna will conclude this particular chapter by comparing the different transcendentalists. Who is the best? A yogi is greater than the ascetic, greater than the empress, and greater than the fruitive worker, which means a person practicing dhyana yoga, Krishna says, is better than somebody who's just given up everything. And then below that rung is a person who's studying the Vedic scriptures. And below that is a person who is engaged in karma kanda activities. So Krishna is saying, in all circumstances, O Arjuna, be a yogi. Try to practice Ashtanga yoga, because that's better than Jnana yoga. It's better than karma kanda. It's better than the Nishkama karma yoga. So in the yoga ladder, Bhakti yoga is better than Dhyana yoga. Dhyana yoga is better than Jnana yoga. Jnana yoga is better than Karma yoga. Better means it's superior. But they're all on the same ladder. Ultimately, you have to end with Bhakti yoga. You have to complete Bhakti yoga. So this is the yoga ladder Krishna is talking about again. And then Krishna will conclude in the very last shloka by giving his opinion. Yoginamapi sarvesham madgatenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yuktatamo mataha. Krishna is saying, and of all the yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So Krishna is saying the person practicing bhakti yoga has the most intimate relationship with Krishna compared to all the other yoga ladders or yoga rungs. So you notice in the shloka, Krishna is talking about service. Those who practice bhakti yoga are always active in the service of Krishna. So how can you be active in the service of Krishna? You are serving Krishna simply by chanting his name. You're serving Krishna just by attending this class. You're serving Krishna if you're engaged in preaching activities. You're serving Krishna if you're making garlands for him in the temple, or stitching nice clothes for him, or designing the altar. You're serving Krishna if you're serving prasadam. You're serving Krishna if you're cooking bhoga for him. You're serving Krishna by cleaning the temple. You're serving Krishna by doing Sankirtan. You're serving Krishna by inviting other people to come and attend this class. All of this constitutes service. And we're doing it out of love to please the Supreme Lord. Hence the Lord is saying, and of all the yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So now this chapter 6 sets the stage for the middle 6 chapters, which is called Bhakti Yoga. So just a quick review of the first 6 chapters. We said the first 6 chapters is all about you, Jivatma. You have to discover yourself. You have to discover who you are, what is your duty and responsibility, what is the qualifications you need to acquire to do those duties and responsibilities perfectly, and how can you learn to ultimately love Krishna. So you discover Jivatma and you also in the process discover Paramatma. The concept of Paramatma has been introduced in section 1, but there will be a heavy focus on Paramatma in the next 6 chapters. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 is all about the Supreme Lord. So now you will hear Krishna speaking about himself more and more and more. But in the first 6 chapters, it began with Arjuna lamenting about his situation because he has lost sense of who he really is, what is his real identity. So Krishna establishes his identity in the 2nd chapter. Krishna explains to him, for a person who is situated on the platform, when they have understood that they are the spirit soul, if you've understood that you are Atman, then what is your duty and responsibility if you've understood that you're Atman? You have to perform karma yoga until you actually achieve that realization of Atman. Intellectually, you have understood spirit is different from matter, but you actually have to realize it by performing karma yoga. And to do your duties and responsibilities very nicely, we all have to qualify ourselves. We need to acquire skills. We need to have the right knowledge. So that right knowledge is understanding Atman and its relationship with Paramatman. And who is this Paramatma? So that's the knowledge that Krishna is giving Arjuna in the 4th chapter. The benefits of working for Krishna is given by Krishna in the 5th chapter, which is inner peace. And if one can always think of Krishna by meditating on him, then that will ultimately lead to Bhakti Yoga. So meditation on Krishna is Dhyana Yoga, which sets the stage for the next 6 chapters, which we will pick up chapter 7 tomorrow, which is titled Jnana Vijnana Yoga. So knowledge of the Absolute. So now that Krishna has told Arjuna who he is, what is his duties and responsibilities, what are the qualifications he needs to acquire, what are the benefits he's going to get working for him. Remember, Krishna has said, work for me in chapter 3. So now you need to know who's the boss that you're going to be working for. So in chapter 7, it's all going to be about the boss. Who is this boss, Vishnu, that Krishna is asking us to work for? So now you're going to discover who's the boss. And if you have to work for him, what is the insurance that he's going to give you? What is the password to please this boss? And how does this boss look? What are his different veshas? The boss takes on different forms, no? Sometimes he wears different clothes. Depending on the kind of clothes, he becomes a different person. So Krishna is going to talk about his different moods and how devotees relate to the different forms of him. And what's the contract that he is giving you, that he is promising you? So all of this will be covered in the next 6 chapters. So do join us for chapter 7 tomorrow at 6 a.m. Vancha kalpadarupyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrindi ki jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.